So today, we're going to dig into this really simple but super powerful idea that explains why sometimes learning a new skill just feels stuck. It's this idea of having a steering wheel, but no engine.
Okay, so have you ever had this feeling? You've done the work, you've read the books, you've memorized all the rules, but when it's time to actually do the thing, write that important email, or lead a meeting, or just create something from scratch, you hit a wall. It feels like a piece is missing. So why does that happen?
And that right there is where our core idea comes into play. See, most of the time, our education gives us a steering wheel. It teaches us the rules, the formulas, the theories. It gives us a way to talk about the skill. But what it often forgets, what it leaves out, is the engine. The actual power, the intuition that comes from real practice, the part that makes it all go.
All right, so let's break this down. The steering wheel, what is that really? Well, think of it like the interface for a skill. We're talking about things like grammar rules, or that classic 5-paragraph essay format, or even those catchy little bits of advice like show, don't tell. They're like simplified maps that help us get our bearings. They're useful for analyzing the craft, for sure, but they aren't the craft itself.
Now, the engine, that's a completely different beast. This is what we call the implementation layer. This is not something you can just memorize from a book. It's an embodied skill. It's deep inside you. It's that intuitive feel for the rhythm of a great sentence, or the ability to read a room and adjust your presentation on the fly. The engine is the part you have to build yourself.
So that kind of begs the question, right? If the engine is what really matters, why do we spend so many years in school just learning how to hold the steering wheel? What is going on here?
And this really gets to the core of it. Schools often focus on the steering wheel, the rules, the templates, because that stuff is just easy to grade. It's legible. The goal becomes about being correct, about complying with the format, not about having a real-world impact. As you can see here, school writing is all about showing a grader what you know. Real writing? That's about actually having an effect on another person. And look, this isn't just about writing papers for school. This tension between the theory and the actual practice, between the rules and real intuition, it's a universal problem that pops up every single time you try to get good at anything complex. What it all boils down to is this core conflict, this fundamental tension in all learning. On one side, you have observation. That's learning by watching, getting a good, accurate model to follow. And on the other side, you have autonomy. That's learning by doing, by getting your hands dirty and building the skill for yourself. The problem is, if you lean too hard into one, you often sacrifice the other.
Okay, let's actually visualize this. Imagine a line, a horizontal axis. All the way on the left, you've got pure observation. Think of being an apprentice, just shadowing an expert. And all the way on the right, you've got pure autonomy. You're just thrown in, total trial and error. Okay, now let's add another dimension, a vertical line. This axis represents what we'll call the E factor. That's the energy, the effort, and the innovative thinking that a learning strategy demands. Down at the bottom, you have the low effort, low E solutions, kind of the default settings. And way up at the top, you've got the high E solutions, the ones that take real work and creativity.
And when you put these two axes together, you get our main tool for today, the problem space diamond. It's basically a map, and it shows us that there aren't just one or two ways to learn, but 5 completely distinct strategies for dealing with that conflict between watching and doing.
So what's on this map? Well, it lays out 5 totally different strategies. At the very bottom, you have equal neglect. That's the low E default of basically doing nothing. Over on the left, pure observation, like being an apprentice. On the right, pure autonomy, being tossed in the deep end. Then there's alternation, which is just bouncing back and forth between the two. And then way up at the top, that high-energy solution, balanced parity.
But, and this is maybe the most important rule of all, there is no single best solution here. The right move always depends on the situation, on the learner, on the goal. The real danger is what you might call pedagogical fundamentalism, just blindly sticking to one method no matter what. This diamond is a map for thinking, not a rule book. Okay, so if we really want to get past just holding the steering wheel, how do we actually build the engine? To figure that out, we've got to look at that strategy at the very top of the diamond, the most powerful one, balanced parity. That brings us to the top of the diamond, balanced parity. This is that high-energy, innovative solution. It doesn't make you choose between watching and doing. It brilliantly integrates them. It creates this special kind of loop where your perception and your action are actually training each other. This is where real mastery happens.
So, what does this actually look like in practice? Let's get concrete and go back to writing. A perfect example of a balanced parity exercise is something called pattern play. Here's how it works. Step 1. You find a piece of writing you really admire. Step 2. You map out its structure, its internal logic. Not the specific words, but what the sentences are doing. Step 3. You recreate that exact same pattern, but with a totally different topic. And finally, Step 4. You mutate it. You play with it. You make it your own.
And I want to be clear, this is so much more than just mindless copying. Not at all. It's like how a jazz musician learns all the classic songs, the standards, so that they have a deep foundation to then go and improvise their own amazing solos. You're not just memorizing rules, you're actually training what the source material calls the motor cortex of writing. You are literally building that engine.
You know, when you boil it all down, it's about a massive shift in how you think about learning, and it's captured perfectly in this quote. The point isn't just to write something to be evaluated, to get a good grade. The real goal is to write so you can act in the world, so you can have a real effect. So, in the end, this problem space diamond, it's not just some theory about writing. Think of it as your new roadmap. It's what you could call a general learning geometry that works for anything you want to master, whether that's leadership, coding, design, you name it. And that really brings us to the final question, the one for you to take away. Think about something you're trying to learn right now, or maybe something you're trying to teach someone else. Where are you on this map? Are you stuck down in that default mode? Are you leaning too hard on just watching? Or are you ready to put in the energy, find that balance, and finally build your engine?